Hey guys, welcome back to more Karen stories. In this video, a Karen blocked my house renovation and pulled a gun on me because I refused to give her my property. Let's dive right into the video. The first one is titled Revenge on Neighbors. So I moved into my block of flats about 3 months ago. There's a group of young adults that are constantly sitting on the stairwell behind my bedroom, smoking, laughing loudly, and running about. One of them lives above me and plays loud music that they rap along to past hours constantly. I've tried reasoning and explaining that I have a 2-year-old and I'm disabled, we deserve peace, but to no avail. I've called Noise Patrol, who they've just argued with, and continued once they have left. Well, tonight I had enough. Tonight I'm home alone with my 2-year-old and I've spoken to them once already. So I chose Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses, which by the way is one of the best songs of all time, the most rock song I could think of, one that my son is familiar with. Then I turned my TV up to 100, which I've never done before. It's pretty loud on 20 and has good bass for a lower-end Samsung model. I have misophonia, but I was so angry it did not even affect me. Then, just to add insult to injury, I started screaming the lyrics, "I cannot sing for love nor money." Once the song ended, I turned my TV off. One guy said, "What the hell?" And they turned their music off and have been silent since. I said to my husband, if this continues, I will turn my sound system on and play Baby Shark on a loop. I'm not playing games anymore. The best part is, the 2-year-old is still fast asleep. And yeah guys, definitely Baby Shark is way more hardcore than Guns N' Roses. Either way, the next one will be the title story, which is titled Karen blocked my house renovation and pulls a gun on me because I refused to give her my property. There is nothing like that old house charm. I remember ever since I was a little kid, I dreamed of having an old cozy little house. I was never one to be attracted to open floor plans and flat roofs. No, none of that modern stuff. I can remember visiting my grandparents' house as a kid and remembering how cozy and inviting it was. And I had always wanted a similar house since then, which is why when I was able to buy my own house, it was so important. The house was in a quiet neighborhood and all the houses had their own individual charm. They were all well maintained, but they didn't look the same. It was nice, it was one of the things that attracted me to the neighborhood, and while the previous owners pretty well maintained the house, I still wanted to do some renovations. After all, this was my first home, so I wanted to make it my own. I also introduced myself to most of the neighbors, who were nice. One couple even told me some stories about the elderly lady that lived here before. She was well loved, and that gave me even more motivation to take care of the property. There was one neighbor though who came off a little ingenuine in her greeting. Oh well, I was just a new guy moving into the neighborhood, so I could not expect everyone to be friendly right away. About a week after moving in, I started having some landscapers and contractors over to start renovations on the place. Not anything crazy, just a little upkeep and whatnot. I was sorting some moving boxes in my garage when one of my neighbors came up to me. They were a middle-aged couple who were friendly when I first introduced myself to them, Bob and Caitlin. Upon talking to them, I couldn't help but notice another neighbor eyeing us from her yard. Oh, it was the one that seemed ingenuine. Bob and Caitlin saw me looking over their shoulders at her and turned around to see what I was looking at. "Oh, have you met her yet? Her name is Karen. She has caused some problems in the neighborhood before, so hopefully she does not cause any problems for you." Most of us think it's so nice a young man can appreciate the value and sentiment of an old house like this. Caitlin spoke. "Yeah, I met her. She seemed a little annoyed that I was introducing myself, but I thought I interrupted her doing something." I responded back. Bob shook his head. "You know, the old lady that lived here before, Barbara, she was so sweet. Karen bothered her all the time about what a beautiful property and house she had, but she was trying to manipulate Barbara into giving it to her." Caitlin nodded in agreement and said, "Yeah, she even went around saying how Barbara was going to give her the house for free once she passed away." Well, that is clearly not true, but she would not shut up about it. Matter of fact, knowing Barbara, she mentioned it in passing just to get Karen to leave her alone. Well, I don't see that happening. There's no way I let anyone take this gem away from me, I said with a smile. We carried on with our small talk, but little did I know Karen would become a problem for me. The next few weeks of renovation were a blur of sawdust, paint swatches, and the distant hum of power tools. My mornings started early, often with landscapers or contractors arriving to chip away at the long list of updates I wanted for the house. I'd been careful to follow every protocol, permits filed, neighbors notified, even making sure that work hours did not disturb anyone too early. It was not just about rules though, I wanted to be respectful to the people living around me, especially since most of them were so kind. Most of the neighbors seemed supportive. Bob and Caitlin often stopped by to admire progress, offering encouragement and advice, but Karen was a different story. From the moment the first truck arrived, she made her displeasure known. At first it was subtle, a disapproving glance here, a pointed question there. "Are you sure that fence is supposed to be that tall?" she asked one morning, leaning over her perfectly manicured hedge. "You know, Barbara would never do something so drastic." "Well, it's within the regulations," I replied politely, hoping to just keep the peace. Just replacing the old one, it was starting to fall apart. Karen did not seem convinced. She pursed her lips and muttered something under her breath before retreating into her house. By the end of the week, her complaints had escalated. She began stopping the workers as they unloaded equipment, demanding to see permits and insisting that they were ruining the neighborhood's character. One particularly bold move came when she dragged a lawn chair to the edge of her driveway and sat there, arms crossed, watching every move they made. "She's been out there for an hour," one of the landscapers whispered to me as I came out to check on their progress. "It's making the crew nervous." I sighed. Karen's presence was more than a nuisance, it was becoming a disruption. I decided to address it head on. "Karen!" I called out, walking over to her. She did not budge, her eyes were fixed on a worker trimming the hedges. "Can I help you with something?" I asked, keeping my tone as neutral as possible. She finally turned to me, her expression icy. "Yes, you can. You can stop whatever this nonsense is and leave the house the way it is meant to be. Barbara would not have wanted any of this." I resisted the urge to roll my eyes and said, "Karen, I appreciate your concern, but I've done everything by the book. The renovations are approved and they are going to continue." Karen stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the driveway. "The house is not yours to destroy," she hissed. "Barbara promised it to me. I was supposed to have it." Her words caught me off guard, and for a moment I did not know how to respond. I was starting to believe that Karen was actually insane. "Barbara's family sold me this house. I have the deed and all the paperwork to prove it." "I'm sorry if there was a misunderstanding, but—" "No," she interrupted, her voice rising. "They lied to you. This house belongs to me and I will not let you ruin it." Not that Karen was ever polite from the beginning, but it made me feel uneasy with how bold she was being. She had zero shame. What kind of person just demands a house? A crazy person, which is who? I kept reflecting, and there was never anything that hinted that the previous owner Barbara was gonna give the house away or anything like that. The next few weeks passed with Karen's behavior becoming increasingly erratic. At first her harassment was limited to petty complaints. She would stand on her porch, arms crossed, and loudly comment to no one about the ruin of the house. "Barbara's poor house," she would mutter, just loud enough for me to hear as I guided contractors or reviewed blueprints. It was annoying, but I tried to just brush it off. Then she started interfering directly. One afternoon I found her talking to the landscapers, her voice sharp. "You cannot cut down that tree, it is historical," she claimed, pointing at a scraggly oak that was clearly dead and posed a safety hazard. The landscaper looked at me confused, and I had to explain that Karen had no authority over the property. When I confronted her about it, Karen did not back down. "You're destroying this house bit by bit," she accused me, jabbing a finger towards the tree. "Barbara would never have allowed this." "Karen, this tree is a danger. It is dead and could fall on someone." "I've hired professionals to remove it safely," I said firmly, but as usual my explanations fell on deaf ears. She huffed and stomped back to her house, but not before muttering, "You will regret this." The disruptions did not stop there. A few days later I caught her on my property, snapping pictures of the construction crew. "What are you doing?" I asked, genuinely baffled. "Documenting your violations," she said smugly, as if she were a detective uncovering a crime scene. "This house has a legacy, and I'm gonna make sure you don't tarnish it." "Karen, you are trespassing right now." "Please leave my property," I said, keeping my tone calm but firm. Her response was to take a few more photos before retreating with a self-satisfied smirk. I was surprised that she did not have anything to say back. Usually, she would go on with her arguments. The neighbors started noticing her strange behavior too. Bob mentioned seeing her pacing along the sidewalk and glaring at my house. Caitlin on one of her visits warned me that Karen had been asking other neighbors if they had seen suspicious activity at my place. It seemed like she was trying to rally others against me. me, but thankfully most of the neighbors saw her antics for what they were, not that she had a good record of accomplishment anyway. Things took a darker turn one evening when a handwritten note slipped under my door. In messy handwriting it read, "This house doesn't belong to you. It is mine. Leave before you regret it." I showed it to Bob and Caitlin, who were equally disturbed. I wanted to show someone else just to make sure I was not going crazy. I'd never dealt with something like this before. "This has gone too far," Caitlin said. "She's clearly unstable." I considered calling the police then and there, but I did not want to escalate things unnecessarily. Plus, how could I really prove that it was her? Before all this, all she had really done was verbally complain. I knew how the police worked and they would not just trust my word. I decided to install security cams around the property, hoping it would deter Karen from further antics. Well, unfortunately, it only provoked her even more. One morning, I woke up to find the tires on my car slashed. It was not just one, it was all four. I checked the security footage and sure enough, there was Karen crouching by my car with a knife in hand. I immediately reported the vandalism to the police, who promised to investigate, but Karen denied everything when they spoke to her. "I've been wrongfully accused," she told them with an air of indignation. "This man is trying to frame me because I care about the house." She outed herself right there. "I cared about the house. Why would I report her to the police if she genuinely cared about this property and the history behind it?" However, the police didn't catch on and said that they couldn't tell from the footage that it was her. Her behavior was becoming more and more shocking, but it was nothing compared to what came next. It happened on a sunny Saturday afternoon. All the physical renovations of the house had been done, and I just had some yard stuff to finish. The landscapers were finishing some landscaping work while I chatted with Bob and Caitlin near the driveway. Karen appeared suddenly, storming across her yard with a wild look in her eyes. She was holding something in her hand, and as she got closer, I realized with horror that it was a gun. "This ends now," she shouted, her voice trembling but loud enough to freeze everyone in place. "I told you, this house is not yours. It is mine, and I'm taking it back." My eyes went wide, Caitlin gasped and stepped back. The landscapers immediately dropped their tools and stopped what they were doing while everything around me felt like it went completely still. Now, I knew that something was not right with Karen. She was some type of crazy, but this was just extreme. I mean, to pull a gun on me over a house that she felt entitled to? What in the hell was going on? "Karen, put the gun down," I said, my heart pounding. I raised my hands instinctively, trying to calm even though I was terrified. I swear in that moment it felt like my heart was gonna come out of my chest. "You're making a mistake." "No, you made the mistake," she snarled while waving the gun around. "Barbara promised me this house and you have no right to it." By this point, the contractors and neighbors had all stopped what they were doing completely. Bob quickly stepped behind his truck, pulling Caitlin with him, while one of the landscapers discreetly dialed 911. "Karen, let's talk about this," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. "You don't want to do something you will regret. You don't have to hurt me." Karen's hand shook as she leveled the gun at me. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she said, though her actions said otherwise. "I just want what is mine." Minutes felt like hours as we stood there, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife, and then the sound of sirens broke through the silence. Karen turned her head towards the noise, and in that moment of distraction, one of the landscapers took a bold step forward, positioning himself between me and Karen, and tackled her to the ground, knocking the gun out of her hand. The police arrived within seconds, their car screeching to a halt at the curb. "Stay on the ground," I heard the police yell. Honestly, I cannot even describe the relief that came over me in that moment. I saw the police handcuff her, and I remember speaking to multiple police officers, but everything else seemed like a blur. All I could think about was how I almost died because some crazy lady wanted my house. As they led Karen to a patrol car, she screamed incoherently about the house being hers and accused me of stealing it. I watched in stunned silence, barely able to process what had just happened. Bob, Caitlin, the contractors, and I all provided detailed accounts of Karen's escalating behavior. I handed over the security footage, including the incident with the car tires and her trespassing. The police also investigated her claim that Barbara had promised her the house, but there was no evidence to support it. Barbara's family confirmed that no such agreement had ever existed. Karen was charged with multiple offenses, including vandalism, harassment, and brandishing of a firearm. Though shaken, I was relieved that the ordeal had come to an end. Bob and Caitlin stopped by often, bringing meals and words of encouragement. It was a breath of fresh air after meeting with investigators and the police department all week. Hell, during that time it seemed like I could not even pick up my phone without hearing about what was going on or getting a call from police. Even neighbors I had not spoken to before came over to express their support and said, "We are glad you're okay." And we are glad that Karen is finally being held accountable. She has always been in the pain in the butt, but this is insane. Karen ended up getting sentenced to 3 years in prison and her house ended up getting foreclosed on. Not even Karen's 2 kids wanted to take over and help her out when it came to her house. That only solidified what a terrible person Karen actually was. All I know now is though that I love my house and the neighborhood despite that initial craziness. How many people can say that they love and know their neighbors? Few. By the way, after hearing about what happened, Barbara's kids came to visit me. They were so happy with how I had fixed the place up and they still honored the house's original beauty. When they drive through town, they stop by every now and then and it makes my heart full knowing that Barbara would have loved the changes. In some way, it gave me validation against all the crap that Karen had said to me. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. Jumping straight into this, I want to give some background to the story. My grandpa recently passed away due to some illnesses he's been fighting on and off for most of his life. In his passing, he left me his property, which came as a shock to all of us because I certainly was not his favorite grandchild. But that's a story for another time. Anyway, this property is roughly 50 acres, so yes, it's a big deal. Most of the property is lush forest, but in the center of it all sits a house some would consider it to be more of a small mansion than a house, with a long gravel driveway stretching all the way to the main road nearby. As I'm sure you have guessed, this was where he lived before he passed. However, he did not really keep the place in the best of nick, lots of rotting planks and damp walls, etc. So I decided I would slowly but surely put some money into the place and do it up. The potential was massive for it to become something just gorgeous. And then the plan would be to either sell it and share the money across my family, or my parents could move in. I live around 6 miles away, so in my free time I go down and do some work on it. It became one of my favorite hobbies. Anyone who has done up a house will know that although it can be quite tedious, it certainly is satisfying work. So this story begins with a particular weekend in June. This is about 10 months after I had started renovating the place. I was on my way down as usual and noticed that the gate which connected the driveway to the main road was slightly ajar. The lock was loose. I figured that the last time I was there, which was a few days prior, I must have forgotten to lock it and didn't think much of it. Of course, I did slightly worry that someone might have been in and had a snoop around, but I chose to push that thought to the side. On this day, everything was fine and I had another day of renovating. I would like to point out at this point, the house was not a mess or anything. I basically always put everything away in the shed after a day's work and hoovered all the carpets, etc. You will see why this is relevant later. Oh, and also, I did have professionals in too. It was not just me doing this. I would have never gotten the majority of it done in such time otherwise. Moving on, this day happened to be the last before I went on a very long and boring work trip for 2 months. I made sure to lock the gate, but after those months had passed and I was on my way back to the property, I saw the lock was loose again. But this time, as I drove up the driveway, I saw a car parked out the front of the house. I froze. I saw a few lights on in the house and my heart started beating. I could not think of who else had access to the property. My mother keeps the spare key and she lived hours away and has a different car. So I did what every stupid person in a horror movie does. I unlocked the door and walked inside, yelling, "Hello?" I heard quiet voices and then heard footsteps. A man and a woman, both in robes, appeared at the top of the stairs. "Excuse me, what are you doing here? We have rented the place for the whole week," the man demanded. "Sir, this is my property and I most certainly don't rent it out." "What are you doing here?" The couple looked between themselves. "A lady named Karen rented this out to us. Is this really not her property? It did seem a little sketchy that she had to pick the gate lock." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I got them to call this Karen lady and within 10 minutes she had arrived. "What seems to be the problem here?" she asked, all smiles. "Who are you and why are you renting out my property?" I asked. Sir, this is my property." "What? You heard me. This is my property." "It most surely is not. Where's your proof?" "Well, I've been renting out the place for the past few weeks. How could I be renting out something that is not mine?" "Past few weeks? Ma'am, you know this is not your property and you've been trespassing and letting others trespass for weeks." "I think we're gonna call the cops. They will sort this." The man from the top of the stairs spoke. "Nope, nonsense. No need. "You two, clear out," Karen demanded, clearly nerfed by the threat of the cops, knowing that she had no proof for all of this. After a lot of arguing between the couple and Karen, the pair left and Karen stayed put. "Listen, what's the issue with me renting this place?" she asked, and I now of course knew the real reason the gate had been ajar the first time I noticed it. "What's the issue?" "The issue is that this is not your property and you had no permission." "Well, I'm gonna rent it out anyway. I need the money." Her voice was raising. "No, you are absolutely not. Who do you think you are? You have no right to do this. Stop acting so entitled." "How dare you? That's the rudest thing I've heard all day. I'm your senior, sir. Don't disrespect me." "Yeah, I can tell," I remarked, causing her face to redden slightly. "I cannot believe this," she screamed and stomped out, getting in her car and driving away. I stayed over that night ordering a new gate and lock to be fitted the very next day. I also ordered CCTV and filed a police report because I had a very big suspicion that I had not heard the end of her. The next day I had everything fitted and unfortunately had to go back to work the following afternoon. It was not long before I got a notification from the CCTV app I had installed on my phone. I happened to be in a meeting when this notification went off and it was just a regular buzz like the rest of them. So I did not end up actually getting to it until an hour later, and by then it was too late. I clicked on and felt my heart almost stop once I saw what was unfolding on the lawn in front of the house. Karen was having a bonfire, and around the bonfire were a good 30 to 40 people, a bonfire that was very close to the house. I almost couldn't believe it. I called the police straight away and started racing over. The police got there before I did and I saw where Karen had climbed the gate. The police broke through with some big metal clippers. I drove up to the house and saw that my worst fears had been confirmed. The house was on fire. It turns out the bonfire was certainly too close and must have spread to the house, which is primarily a wooden build with a gust of wind. After getting over the shock of the house partially in flames, I looked around and saw that most of the guests had run away and that Karen was currently in cuffs being detained by 2 officers, one who had a black eye, presumably from her, and there was also a fire truck putting out the flames. "Sir, are you the owner?" one of the officers asked me, kneeling down to my level, as at this point I'd gotten out of the car and collapsed to my knees. I stammered a nod, I barely heard what he said after that. Something about pressing charges that they would punish this lady and get my statement after the fire was sorted with. So that is what happened. The fire was put out, a very large chunk of the house was gone or deteriorating. I could tell I would need new beams all over and a new roof at the very least. "Sir, I know this is hard, but this is my property!" I suddenly heard Karen scream from where she was being held. "You!" I yelled as I stormed over to her. "You did this! How could you? I wanted to have a bonfire, and hey, if it meant destroying your hard work in the process, what's the issue?" "What have I ever done to you?" I asked, and she stared at me with this look as if she wanted to say more but couldn't. It was almost a "how do you not know" look. To this day, I still don't know if there's something I had done to her, but that is an adventure to have another time. She did not respond, and that's when I started giving my statement to the police. I then went to my car and pulled out the deeds to the property to show them. Thankfully, I didn't keep them in the house. I also showed them the CCTV footage, and that was all they needed. They hauled her away and gave me a ride with them to the station. No court case was needed. After a property surveyor looked at the property, they would just charge her straight away for what she did. Of course, she was charged with trespassing and arson was on there too, but as it turns out, she was stealing the credit cards of the people who she rented my property to, so she went down for fraud as well. If you are wondering how she managed to get a key for the door, I still have no idea. She didn't say how and just kept insisting it was her property. Part of me thinks there might be more to this story. Either way, she got 15 years in prison for the listed above. The property surveyor finalized that over $1 million of damages had been done, so of course that fine went straight to her. They also added a few $100,000 on top for the labor it will take to repair the place. I'm sure she will be spending the rest of her life, once out of prison, trying to pay that back. All this happened a few months ago, so of course the house is not fully fixed yet. We have decided not to sell the place. We feel like it would be giving her what she wanted if we do, in a weird way. I'm still weirded out by the whole situation, and I'm glad she got what she deserved, but I of course still wish that none of this ever happened in the first place. All I can hope is that after those 15 years, she does not come back, but something tells me I might not be so lucky. And to end things off, we will read one story from r/PettyRevenge. It is titled, "Please message me in the group chat." Alright, but you won't like it. So I have a coworker I don't get along with. I tried being friendly with him when I first started, but he listened to a coworker who worked in my unit and she only ever spoke badly about me. She later admitted it is because she has a hard time making friends, is shy, and sometimes being a little bit mean helps her open up. Anyway, this coworker guy is only ever nice and helpful to girls. For the longest time, I was the only guy in my unit, and that meant if he had info he needed to share to me, he would just take it to my boss. If he had info to share to anyone else in my unit, he would come bearing gifts, usually Mexican or Japanese snacks. He prefers his private messages to be only from girls in the office. Recently, he directly told me to only message him in the group chat. If it hasn't been for the way he told me, I would have been okay. There are managers in the group chat, timestamps, etc. So I began to message him in the group chat, but only to point out his errors, showing that he was making people wait up to an hour to hear from him on issues that normally take 2 to 5 minutes to get a response back on, sending messages that people are on hold for him, and implying that he should be taking calls he promises to take and not leaving them to flirt with girls in the office. In the last hour of the day, he came back to me and just quickly said, "Please send messages for me directly to me." I didn't. He was very stern in needing messages for him in the group chat. And yeah guys, please post some star emojis in the comments if you enjoyed the stories, and I will see you again tomorrow.